everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this evening? Happy and blessed Tuesday, and welcome to episode 492 of the Welcome to Asgard podcast. Man, I'm already messing up. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the debate over the new film Civil War. I actually dug it, surprisingly. Someone who really liked Alex Garland's first film, Ex Machina, really did not like his next film, Annihilation, did not even have any interest in going to see the film Men, but then went to go see this movie, very low expectations, was expecting it to be a complete political fest, and was pleasantly surprised that it was actually a very well thought out and thought-provoking film that also featured some very good cinematography amongst other just objectively good things. There's really not much else I can say about it. But what we can say, and what's I can absolutely admit, is that what is more interesting than the movie itself has actually been the debate surrounding the film, has been the discussion surrounding the movie, whether it's a good movie, whether it's a bad movie, whether it's political, not political, whether it's woke or not. And so that's been a very interesting discussion to be watching. I'm definitely on the side of the good people over at Film Threat, people like Chris Gore and Alan Ng, who both really enjoyed the film, thought it was very solid. I am of the same ilk as they are. I am also of the same ilk as someone like Jeremy Johns, who thought that it was a good time. And even really the only good criticism I've heard of the film so far has been from the Critical Drinker. And even he had to admit, like, there's some really good things in the film. He also had some very legitimate criticisms, though, of the story. And I have to say, I think that if there's any criticism out there, it's going to be his. I think that he really hits the nail on the head. And I think that anyone who's criticizing the film probably should take a page out of his book and at least be able to admit the objectively good things that are in the movie before going in elsewhere. But we'll talk about that. We'll also give a little bit of update on the box office because, as you all know, crazy stuff at the box office. I did not expect the third week of Godzilla x Kong to not be a number one spot, especially not to a film like Civil War. Now, I know, again, it's the opening weekend of Civil War versus the third week of Godzilla x Kong, but I mean, even you, hopefully, have been watching this channel long enough to know, yeah, the third week of a very big movie typically is going to continue to dominate. Think about how many weeks you had other films at that number one spot before they finally got knocked off. In this case, it only took 3 weeks, and it got knocked off by a film called Civil War that no one was really expecting to do much of anything. And what's even more surprising is that the Monday numbers are now out, and Civil War even beat Godzilla x Kong on Monday, and actually had a pretty decent drop from Sunday to Monday to boot. All the while, Godzilla x Kong is already under $1 million a day, which, as you all know, domestically at the very least, indicates that the interest in the film seems to be waning somewhat. That's not to say that the film's not going to be able to reach some of the milestones I mentioned over the weekend. I do think that the film still has a little bit left in domestic market. And of course, we know that internationally is where that film is shining and will definitely continue to shine, going more so into the future. So we'll talk about that and also a plethora of other things. Before going any further, please make sure you smash that like button, line up that fire button over on Odyssey, and smash the rumble button as well, and say hello to the people in the chat. So, of course, OBS decided to crash, much like it tends to, before the stream got started, and so some of the chats I'm not going to be able to highlight, but I want to give a shout out to General Wingster, who at the Army of Asgard level has been a member for 6 months. Shout out to you, General Wingster, our pet troll here on the channel, who says, Odin, what kind of American are you? That's a great question, and also a very chilling moment in the movie. I think that some people are wrongly interpreting that scene, especially a lot of people who have just not seen the movie. There are a lot of people commenting on it who have not actually seen it and have just seen that scene or have just seen what they think that scene is. And I think that it really actually is very, very telling, because that's oftentimes how we even communicate with one another. It's like, oh, where do you stand on this issue? Are you a Trump supporter? Are you a Biden supporter? Like, those are the kinds of things that we're already doing. And though we're not going to the extents to which that character in the film, played by Jesse Plemons, is going, as far as, killing people and such, we definitely do other people based off of their views, based off of their opinions. So, again, I think that it's a very deep moment, and I think that it's a very powerful moment because of that. But General Wingster, what kind of American am I? I'm an American. That's all there really is to it. That's all there is to it. I guess you could say I'm an Irish American. I'm a German American. I'm all kinds of American, man. All right, we also had Snortopoopas Cuber, who was here earlier saying, hello, humans and other quitters, and then said, hello to you, Snortopoopas. Thanks for being a member on the channel. We got CM Chunk hanging out. What is going on, CM Chunk? Live long and prosper indeed. And then we had Kimberly G. Shadowcat, and I think that is where things start to be able to be loaded up on my screen. Let me go ahead and just get this back to the live screen. There we go. All right, so Kimberly G, Killian, Shadowcat. What's going on, Kimberly G? Saying, happy Tuesday, Odin, the mods in chat. Happy Tuesday to you as well. Thank you for being here. As always, very much appreciated. We got Prince Screen, who's a member. Hail to you, Prince Screen. Thanks again for your membership. We got G-Monkey76. What's going on? Icthulu, member, saying, hello, Odin, and everyone in the chat. Hope your day was wonderful. I hope your day was wonderful as well. It's been a pretty good one. We're doing some testing at school, so that's always a fun time. We're doing some projects on Catholic social teaching as well, a topic that I very much am passionate about, fascinated by, and every year it's you find out more and more, and I'm always just very impressed too. There's some groups that are going that are just blowing me away as far as just the quality of presentation, and I've had two groups especially where I've told them both that they are basically some of the best presentations I've seen in the many years that I've been teaching that subject. So it's been really cool to see. Orange Hat Reviews, I dead named you, Orange Hat. The man with the orange hat. Sorry, mea culpa. Welcome to Asgard. Behave and keep it PG. Indeed, Orange Hat. He will lay down his mighty axe if you do not. Please also put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. @Odin lets me know that you're trying to get my attention. We don't hide anything here behind a paywall. So please feel free to chat. But please say hi first. Don't just come in with a question like some people do at the beginning of streams, leaving a comment hours earlier when I have no ability to even bring it up on screen without even saying hi. It's just cold and calculating. I do fall about 20, 30 minutes behind. He is indeed correct there. We got Keely Chow in the chat. What's going on, Keely? He says, hey, everybody. Good morning from Hong Kong. That's right, Keely Chow. Appreciate you being here. Keely Chat also tagged to say, how are you, Thor, Freya, and Baby Sif doing? Let's see, Thor, guess Baby Thor, Toddler Thor now, I guess you could say. He's doing well. We're in the midst of potty training, so that's definitely a new experience, but he had a pretty good day today, at least when he got home. He has issues with transitions from one activity to the next, and so when we get home, we have to try to say, hey, you got to go to the potty, and it's just like, oh my gosh, just can't do it. And so that's been frustrating for everybody, including him. But today he had this is when you know that you're a parent, right? So he had a massive poop on the potty, and we were so proud of him, and it was very exciting. It was very, very exciting. Anyone who's a parent out there, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Carl Jacobs, hello chat. Hello to you, Carl Jacobs. Welcome back. Wayward Noodle, who's a member. Hail to you, Wayward Noodle. Let's see. Gary Banjo Sandwich Worthington, what is going on? Gary saying, get well soon, Chris Gore. Absolutely, thoughts and prayers going out to Chris Gore for a quick recovery. Let's see. Print Screen says, the worst part of Civil War is the fact that Thor and Hulk weren't in it. I think that's valid. Let's see. Laura, the Modern Major General story. What is going on? Laura, appreciate you being in the chat as always. One of my mods here. We got Sherry Allen. What's going on, Sherry Allen? What's going on? Icthulu, time to say the movie Civil War was fine. It's like a typical 90s movie that was about people instead of the backdrop of war that everyone wanted to push their politics on. And yeah, I think that really gets down to kind of the crux of this first topic, right? Where I think a lot of people, when it comes to this film, the ones who are, particularly the ones who are hating on it, the ones who are really just dragging it down, are going in with their own preconceived notions. So it could be that they just know a lot more about Alex Garland. Could be that they know more about his politics or his perceived politics, right? Whatever it might be. And so that's what they're putting onto the movie. All right. And again, that's their subjective experience. And so we can't take anything away from anyone's subjective experience, right? That's not what I'm attempting to do here at all, right? The issue that I always have is when people try to start to make some type of objective argument when those just really don't really hold all that well against it. And so ultimately, though, I think that you're right. I think that that is the reason why so many people are hating on the film more so than it even ever deserved to be, is because they're bringing their own political biases into it, which is funny because many of them bringing their political biases into it are claiming political bias in it. So it's just, again, also, I think it's showing you why this film is so, at the end of the day, doing what it's supposed to be doing. I mean, it was a movie that was promoted heavily, and I think that the marketing team is garbage. I'm just going to say that straight up, because the film is marketed. One, it's marketed as being political when it really isn't. And then two, it's marketed as being much more of a war film than it actually is. It's actually more of a road trip movie. That's obviously something a lot harder to sell. And so it makes sense why they would want to market it the way they did, but I also hate when marketing firms and studios do that. It drives me nuts when you get that false advertising. But that also, I think, is the reason why people went into it, right? Even I went into it thinking, okay, this is going to be political, hogwash. And it never actually happened. I kept waiting for it. I kept waiting for the moment. I was paying attention to every single word being said, and it just never happened. And again, even when you get to that moment with Jesse Plemons, when you could technically perceive something there, even then there's nothing, right? I mean, you have people who are hating on the film so much that they are literally dissecting one moment where there's this one scene that features a sharpshooter shoot-off, essentially, right? Two snipers that are going back and forth. And you have people that are going out of the way saying, oh, did you see the nail polish? Clearly that's the sign of trans representation. And I'm like, what? Like, that's just reaching at this point. I feel like we can be so much better than that in our criticism. And so I think a lot of people are reading way too much into it and putting their own biases into it. Kincaid Rumsky, what's going on over on Rumble? What's going on, Kincaid Rumsky? Do you consider the journalists to be good guys or bad guys? That's just the thing. I don't see how you can come out of the film thinking that they are good guys or thinking that they are being portrayed as good guys. You have literally Kirsten Dunst's character walking through bodies after a bombing. Some of them are even still moving. And she has no care about it whatsoever. And the argument that I keep hearing is, oh, well, this is meant to represent how cold-hearted and cool you have to be as a journalist. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I don't see how as a human being, you don't look at that and say, wow, that is awful. Like, I came away from it saying, wait, is this what a lot of on-the-ground journalists are? That they've become so detached from what's going on? Like, it honestly, I think it actually shows you why moral relativism is such an evil philosophy. Because you actually see this a lot within sociology. Not to randomly bring up sociology, but I remember taking a class in college, and one of the things we had to do was we had to read, because I went to a liberal arts college, a Jesuit liberal arts college, and so, we had to take classes on like a pluralistic class and stuff. Like, it was just garbage. It's like, we basically had to take a bunch of woke classes, or perceived woke classes. I had to take a religion and feminism class, for instance, which actually ended up not being that bad. The students were awful. The students in that class were just, oh man, everything that you think about when you think about gender theories, people, like that's what that class was made of. The teacher actually was pretty good. She was very objective, basically taught it like a history class almost. And I learned a lot. I didn't agree with most of what was being said, but it was, again, mostly being said by the students and not by the teacher. But one of the other classes I had to take, we actually had to read a book that was written by like a sociologist, or I'm thinking of a different word for it, but someone who spends time within a community studying them and is meant to be like detached from them and is meant to be studying their every move and basically never steps in. And like, I immediately walked out of that thinking, wow, these people are despicable too, because they will look back, they will look upon these cultures doing these atrocious things, doing these objectively evil things, and will say, well, I can't get involved. Kind of the whole Star Trek thing of, oh, well, we're the higher species and we can't get involved. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, there is objective good and objective evil in the world. You cannot just allow this to happen. So going back to the movie, I think that when you look at everything that's being portrayed, right, they're just looking at these people being killed, not doing anything to help, not doing anything to try to offer assistance whatsoever. This happens even with some of their own friends as well. There's this really great character arc where you have one of the characters that starts off in a very different place and then ends at the opposite end, so much so that they just watch their friend die right in front of them, and they care more about getting the shot just right than anything else. And so you can only walk away from that thinking, wow, they are just being portrayed as just the worst people imaginable. So again, I don't see how you walk out of that thinking, wow, they're the heroes of the story. Now, if someone says, oh, well, Alex Garland said that that's how he wanted the characters to be portrayed, it's like, okay, if that's what he thinks, that's not what actually happened. That's not how the story actually progressed. Because you just walk away from it saying, wow, these people are pretty despicable. And I think that also could be another legitimate criticism. I think that's something even Critical Drinker brought up, is that the characters really don't have a lot of character to them. You don't get a lot of backstory on them. They're very much a mystery. And to me, I think that that's kind of the point, is that they are meant to be simply the vehicle by which you travel on to witness the horrors of this war, right? So you are there to tag along with them on this road trip where it's the things that you're seeing on screen. It's the sounds that you're hearing. Sound plays a very important role in this movie. In fact, in the very beginning, and I've seen other people mention this, and so I think that it must be a part of the film, but watching this thing in IMAX especially, oh my gosh, the sound design on this thing was brilliant because it just creeps you out. But in the very beginning, it almost has this, I think it was Alan Ng who had mentioned this on Film Threat, watching it at IMAX, there are these random like loud noises, and it's like just going around the theater with the surround sound, and it sounds like kind of like a sound test. But then you realize, oh man, like, no, that's just there because it's meant to just create already this atmosphere of discomfort. And that just continues on throughout the entire movie. But a big part of that is the fact that, again, these journalists are just shown to be quite despicable. You really don't like them. And so part of what makes someone a hero is you care about them, you care about their journey, and that's not what you get here. And you shouldn't, because again, they're not the heroes of the story. Let's see. Kid the Chow says, it was a mistake for Godzilla vs. Kong to not be named King Kong vs. Godzilla Dawn of the Monsters. That's up to you. Let's see. Forever Sci-Fi, hail to you. Appreciate you. Let's see. Hardwick, what's going on, brother? Always trying to stir stuff up again. The Uber Geek made a review of Civil War. He ripped it to shreds, explaining just how nonsensical the story is. Well, okay, good for him. He doesn't have to enjoy the film, but I'm sorry, the only legitimate criticism I've heard of the film so far has been Critical Drinkers. And also, again, the other people, because again, Critical Drinker walked away from the film not liking it, but he at the very least had to give credit to, credit where credit was due. Let's see. Wendy Hunter, what's going on? Yeah, I know I saw it when it was coming in live. I may have missed it when the stream started, but hey, Wendy, welcome back. Glad to have you in the chat once again. Appreciate you. Your average picture nerd just dropping in to say, hey, what's going on? Where are you going? Why are you just dropping in to say hi? You should stick around. Master Gaming, I saw Civil War and I liked it. I can understand why people might feel uncomfortable by the premise, especially with how divided America has become. For me, it's less to do with that. I think that some people are just, again, I think they're just bringing in their own biases. And what drives me crazy is there's so many people who leave comments on like the box office videos who say, yeah, I have no interest in watching it because of what X person said. And it's like, this is one of those movies where you really just need to watch it to make up your own mind. Again, you don't have to watch it. I would say if anyone is especially susceptible to or sensitive to violence, it's not like it's wall-to-wall violence, but the scenes that are violent, I think, are much more disturbing than what a lot of the criticism has been levied at. I mean, at one point, they show you a guy being set on fire. And the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how they pulled that off. Because it very well could have been CG. It didn't look like he had any of that, the typical thing you would have on like a stunt person, for instance. But it was just, again, that's how impressive it was. You're like, oh my gosh, I just watched this guy get set on fire in front of me. That's crazy. And there's a bunch of other things too, where again, you see a lot of things, and it is, I think, again, disturbing, not just from a visual standpoint. It's not like Saw, right? Where you're getting just heavy amounts of blood and all this other stuff. It's much more grounded in realistic portrayals of violence and the effect that has. Let's see. Snow Golem 13. What's going on, Snow Golem? Represented in the Odyssey fam. Master Gaming says, as a wise person once said, sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Yeah. But again, I think that it has more so to do with preconceived notions than anything else. Snort Poop, as a member, says, I always celebrate my massive poops. Sorry, you didn't need to know that. I did not need to know that. But that's okay. Laura says, you have to judge the movie by what it was, not what you wanted it to be. Exactly, Laura. And I think I actually stand corrected because other than Critical Drinker, I also think that Laura, I think Shorty Short's criticism was also well-founded as well. And we'll talk about the conversation. We'll mention some people's reviews as well when we go further into that, because I do think it's important. Definitely think it's important for us to try to be as honest in our conversation as we possibly can. See, Wendy Hunter says, is Civil War a bait and switch type movie? If you are going based off of the trailers, then I would say the trailers are deceptive because they make you think that it's going to be more political than what it actually is. It also makes you think that the war is going to be more prominent than what it actually is. I would say, if you are a person that you think you enjoy, not necessarily violence, but you enjoy stories that are told over the course of a journey that the characters go through. So the main premise being that these characters are trying to get to DC because they want to interview the president. And for people saying like, that doesn't make any sense, it's like, in the movie, they actually say, oh, well, just like so-and-so did this, right? You know, like they make a reference to someone else having done something similar as being kind of their motivation for wanting to go to interview the president as all this stuff is going on. And it's like, man, it would have been so interesting to hear these things. And if you really think about it, like, this is a world where the media is essentially, you know, dying, right? Because it's violence, and it's not violence in another country that you can leave. It's violence in your own country. And so this is one of the only stories that's really left at this point, right? And that's the other thing too, is it just, again, shows you that the media is so focused on just trying to get the story. They don't care about the morality of what's going on. They don't care about what is true or not. We know this as a fact, right? All they care about is trying to get the story for their own attention, for their own feeding of the egos. And that's the other thing too. At one point, you have all of these media personalities, or all these journalists who are staying in this one hotel, and you're thinking to yourself like, okay, so this is just a hotel for journalists, and it's for what the time is and how it's being presented. It's like more of like an upscale place, posh. It's like, okay, yeah, this makes complete sense to me. It's like, yeah, of course these journalists think of themselves in such a high degree that they're going to be, you know, expecting all these things, like all this stuff's going on. It's like, man, I can't connect my internet. It's like, yeah, again, this type of privilege that we see, it continues, right? And so that's why when I would say bait and switch, from the trailers, from the marketing, sure. But if you go in knowing what it is, I think that, you know, again, I went in thinking it would be something else, and I still came out of it really enjoying it. So, all right, see. Sherry Allen says, I'm good, busy with Blind Low Vision Foundation meetups to help support the community. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Always good to stay busy. Let's see, Hardwick, are you familiar with the term Reddit carnage? It's a term some people use to describe and criticize a particular type of modern hyper-violent action movie. Never heard of it before, don't really have an interest. Prince Green, if nail polish was transgender, then that would mean Pete Davidson is too. Yeah, I think the argument was like because the colors are somewhat similar to some of the colors. And then the issue is there, it's like, well, think about how many colors now are represented on the flag, right? Of the so-called pride flag, right? It's like an infinite number. So it's like, okay, yeah, there's any combination of things. So, oh, man. Yeah, so yeah, Wendy, I definitely think having marketing, yeah, I think the marketing is deceptive for sure. See, Snorter Poopa says, I think there are then a few journalists who see carnage as a good opportunity for them to show off their chops and advance their careers. Exactly. Because it's all about trying to get the shot. Again, when you have Kirsten Dunst's character walking through the carnage of these dead bodies, not looking to see if they're okay, but wanting to get the right shot so that she can then upload these, so that she can then get her work out there, right? Again, it's all about feeding that ego. Why do they want to go interview the president? Again, to feed the ego, saying, oh, because then we can be the ones that got there. We can be the ones that were able to talk with them, right? So it's all about feeding the ego. And then again, one of the key character developments that happens throughout the movie it's again something where it's like she cares so little for this person that she has now spent so much time with just to be able to get the shot, to feed the ego. So they do not come out looking good after this. Okay, if I was right with sociologist, okay. Let's see, Cthulhu tagged to say, the moment Kirsten Dunst fell and no one cared was brutal to watch because you expected a moment of realization from the actors and the director pulled the rug out from everyone. Oh, absolutely, right? Because that's the other thing too. And I guess we'll get into some spoilers here. So if you care at all about anything about this movie, I don't think it would change that much of your perception of the film. But it is I think a pretty important moment. So I guess like kind of light spoilers. But yeah, in that moment that you're talking about with Kirsten Dunst, all right, you have one of the characters that it's established has known her for a long time. So you have this up and coming one who's like a big fan of hers, big fan of her work, and then you have the other one that's been with her, for many years. And yet neither of them give a damn when stuff goes down. And that to me is also, again, how can you say they look good coming out of this? How can you possibly say that? Unless, again, you're going in with your own preconceived notions of what the story is telling you when it's not actually telling you that. All right, let's see. Forever Sci-Fi's member says, I think 1997 is the second Civil War with Phil Hartman, Bo Bridges, James Earl Jones sounds better and more realistic. It starts with the feds bringing in immigrants against a state's wishes. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, too, is in many ways, this film is set up as more of a fantasy than anything else. And I think that's the other issue, too, is that people want to know, okay, what was happening, what led to this Civil War, right? What was the cause? And that's the other thing, too, that I actually appreciated because it doesn't just spoon feed you everything. It's not just being like, oh, you want to know this? Okay, here it is, right here for you. Instead, you have to actually pay attention and think, okay, what are the context clues? How can I decipher? And you never get enough to know everything, but you can make some guesses of, okay, it seems that there is this tyrannical, person who's been elected to the presidency, and that they attacked American citizens to some degree as well. Like that's kind of like the things that you can try to pick up from what's being laid down. But that's what makes it more interesting because then you're like, okay, now I actually kind of have an interest of knowing. It's like when they have those movies that have more of the open-ended ending. It's like sometimes that's a good thing because it leaves you the ability to actually make speculation and to have general thoughts about it as well. But another part of it is not just the open-endedness of it. It's also it's set in America, but it's also not set in America. Because again, there's things that happen where you think, well, wait a minute, how would that work, right? And I think that ultimately you do have to, again, have to look at the film as not just being here's exactly how a civil war will happen, but in this made-up future, these events all happen to lead to Texas and California coming together, right? And then what I think is the more interesting one, like that's what's so great about it too, is that it actually makes you more interested to find out more about the lore of this world. Because you also have like this whole connection with Florida. Like there's a Florida commission or, I forget the name that they give to it. But basically there's a Florida contingent and they're trying to get the Carolinas to join them. And so it's like you got all these different factions that are surrounding it. And you're like, man, that's just interesting. It's like, I want to know, okay, why is Florida kind of doing its own thing? Why are they not aligned with Texas and California? Right? Why are all these other states, where do these other states fall that are still a part of the quote United States? And then there's also interesting because you have the California-Texas coalition coming in and they've got 2 stars. So they've already got their own flag. Like they're acting as if they are their own country. It's very interesting. See, Wendy says, I worked at my county prosecutor's office as a paralegal for years, and I'd gotten a jaded sense of humor due to the major types of crimes I worked on. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Tina. I know that she worked with the FBI for a long time, and I know the things that she had to see caused her to be, not just jaded, but also, very much, disturbed by a lot of this stuff. Master of Gaming says, my favorite scene in Civil War is when the soldiers ask the journalists what part of America. That's the scene I was talking about, right? And that's the thing that General Winkster mentioned, right? Is, what kind of American are you? And again, I think that it's an important scene because that one actually, to me, is one of the ones that speaks the most to our actual current day America, right? Because think about just how divided we are. Think about how much separation there is, how we judge people based off of the letter next to their name. It's kind of crazy. And though we're not at the point where we're necessarily going to kill somebody for it, we can kill them spiritually in our mind. I mean, think about how there are literally families that have disowned other family members because they voted for a specific person. So I think to that as being one of the more honest moments, actually, because that's already kind of where we are, of being like, oh, well, what kind of American are you? What letter is next to your name, right? Are you a part of the Florida, Texas, or the Texas, California coalition? Are you a part of the United States? Like, what are you? And again, it's something that I definitely think is the most honest. Prince Screen tried to say, I haven't seen it yet, but Civil War sounds like a movie with antagonists as protagonists. That's just the thing, though, is that I don't really think that they're even being presented as protagonists. They're the main characters. They're the lead characters. And I guess you can look at them as they think themselves to be the protagonist. I don't think the film really presents them in that way necessarily. So, and I guess with that, let's go ahead and jump into some of the reviews, because obviously we'll continue to talk about this as y'all's comments continue to come in. But of course, we're going to go over to critic lists. All right. So shout out to critic lists. Big fan of the site. I've been on this site for a long time, and glad to hear that they're getting a lot of support. I know that, you got Film Threat hanging out over here. Alan Ng is putting reviews up, and he gave a very similar score to what I gave. I gave this film a 75. And so I guess we can start there. As it says, in the near future, a group of war journalists attempt to survive while reporting the truth as the United States stands on the brink of civil war. Now, again, I think that even that overview is really not true, because it is at civil war, right? The war is waging. And so I think that my biggest criticism of anything related to the film is the marketing, because I think the marketing is definitely very disappointing. The acting is very good throughout. Again, Kirsten Dunst gives a great performance. Wagner Moura, apparently he got his start on Narcos, and I've never seen Narcos, but I've heard great things about him. I can see why. He gives a really good performance here. Kaylee Spaney, who plays Jessie, I think that she was very, very good in this role too. She plays the young, up-and-coming photojournalist. I actually really like what you find out, again, because the story is not there just to tell you everything. It's to give you enough information to know something about them, but then also leaving certain things, kind of open to you trying to fill in the gaps. And at one point, she talks about how her father is the reason why she actually has the camera she has. Because some people also were criticizing the fact that she was using like a film camera, but she talks about that saying, well, her dad gave it to her. And there's also this fun moment, because then you're like, oh, okay, it must be the sentimental thing. It's like, no, my dad's living on a farm, just imagining that nothing's happening, that nothing's going on in the world. But the fact that still, like, this camera's clearly been in her family for a while, so that's why she's using it. So it's not like, oh, using film because it's cool or anything. It's like, no, it's like literally that's the camera that her dad gave to her when she showed interest in becoming a photographer. It's like, I get that. That makes sense to me. Nick Offerman is the president. Very limited. Again, the trailers make it seem like you'll get to see more of him. You don't. Stephen McKinley as Sammy. One of my favorite characters, to be honest, in the film. I thought that he was a lot of fun. Very talented actor. Who just doesn't get enough screen time in any of the roles he's in, whether it is in Dune, where his screen time is so limited that it's frustrating, because that's just also violating a lot of the stuff that happens in the book with Dune, especially. But even in this one, his screen time is much more limited, unfortunately. One that I was actually happy to see in here was, what is his full name? See, Jefferson White. So anyone who may not know him right away, you'll definitely recognize him if I mention that he is in Yellowstone. So I was very happy to see him in here, just because, again, of that connection with Yellowstone. And again, all around, all the actors that come in to the story throughout are talented. Jesse Plemons, obviously, I love Jesse Plemons, but my issue is that he needs more screen time. He deserves so much more screen time. He's so much more of a dynamic actor. He really honestly deserves it. So let's dive into some of these reviews. All right, so let's start off first with what I wrote down here. All right, so here's my full review of this film. So I gave it a 75% rad score, and I said this: there's a lot going on in this movie, and I will formulate more thoughts later, But what I can say is that the film was definitely not the political dumpster fire many of us thought it could be. Now, that was the first thing I wrote when I came out of the theater, because I wanted to get a score posted with filling in the blanks of the review after that. So when I got back, I was able to write this. Now that I have had some time to think about the film, I think I can easily say that this will be a love or hate kind of movie for a lot of people. Despite the attention-grabbing title, this is still very much an Alex Garland movie. Having been disappointed with his career choices after the spectacular film Ex Machina, I definitely think he's beginning to return to form with this film. I still hold to that. Ex Machina was a phenomenal movie, really put him on the map for me because it was just such a powerful showing in storytelling. It showed a very unique style as well, where it was kind of in a way you could look at it as being more of this indie art housey type feel, and yet it was still enough to where a lot more people were able to access it, were able to enjoy it. And so it's definitely not an Ex Machina, but it's also miles and miles and miles better than what Annihilation was. Oh my gosh, I can't stand that film. This one, much better. The story of how heartless, and here's again, this is what the story is actually saying. The story of how heartless and jaded journalists R/Ken get after spending time in war and witnessing atrocities really helps bring a balance to the story, as they are meant to be presented as the good guys or heroes. One thing that this film does is show that there are no good guys when there is war on our front door. The media, the Western Front, and what is left of the United States all prove to be corrupt, broken, or flawed in some way. So again, even though they're presented as the main characters, as the quote-unquote heroes, they're really not, right? As far as what's actually happening. I have been seeing some people trying to make the argument that the film is just a, quote, liberal allegory for Trump. The fact is that the film really doesn't try to make that point. Ultimately is the kind of movie that many people could make arguments to serve whatever purpose they wish, whatever they bring into it. What I can say is that the film is more of a slow burn than a nonstop action flick. Even with it being essentially a road trip across the war zones, there are several moments that are unsettling both visually and audibly. Seeing this thing in IMAX especially made all of the sound cues, gunfire, helicopters, etc., that much more impactful. Oh my gosh, there's a couple of sequences where even just the sound of the helicopters, when the Western Front is trying to get collected and being brought together, it was honestly something where I was happy to be in IMAX, but it was also, again, it was very unsettling. I'm going to be very interested to see how this film does as far as those sound cues for people who have seen it in non-IMAX screens, and also how this film translates in home media. It's good enough to where I personally plan on buying this thing on physical media when it comes out. Anyway, I wouldn't say that this is the best movie of the year material, but I will say that it leaves you thinking and is definitely one that has a lot to unpack. Be warned, the film is graphic at times, and the sound cues and overall volume of some scenes may definitely be too much for those sensitive to that kind of thing. And then I give just general views on this and say political bias. The only bias that it has is how bad war can be and how idiotic it would be to have a war here in the United States. So again, those were my thoughts on the film Civil War. Let's let's see what some other people have been saying. So again, 23 reviews have been posted on Critic List. Right now, the average score is a rad score. The one Friends with Benefits that has seen the film is Laura. Shout out to you, Laura. So she gave it a 58% decent score. I think that's respectable. But again, 73% right now is the average. All right, so let's see. This guy said 88%. Civil War is a 2024 dystopian war drama directed by Alex Garland. The film features an ensemble cast consisting yada, yada, yada. The film's plot follows a group of reporters who are making their way through a war-torn civil feud. Okay. All right. Says, I'm going to be doing things different here. Usually I talk about the cast, then the plot, and finally some technical aspects, trying to sprinkle in my positives and negatives for each. Here I am saving the plot for last, as this will be the crux of what I have to analyze along with the film themes and overall message. Okay. Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay. I was thinking that one would be a little bit more digestible, but hey, shout out to you, good sir. I will have to read that review later, but he gave it an 88%. All right, let's see. My pal Al. I appreciate any movie that forces you to engage and think, not spoon feed you the message. Best to watch in a crowd and talk about afterwards with friends. I would agree with that. There are definitely a lot of people that stayed to have conversations in my theater, which was actually for an IMAX opening night for a movie like this. The crowd actually was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. There were more people who went to see this movie in IMAX than some other big films that came out this year. I think there were maybe as many, if not more, seeing this than saw Ghostbusters, for instance. So clearly there is a market there. Let's see. Sin's Corner, 77%, 3.75 stars. This was an interesting and sobering take on the possibility of civil war in America. Appreciate that this didn't attempt to take sides or tell us what or how to think. To be fair, it's more about what it's like to be a war journalist than anything else. Video review are coming shortly. And again, I think that's definitely an accurate description. Let's see. Sober Gaijin. Let's see. It says here, I understand several scenes were deleted from Civil War, beginning with an opening explanation of how this country devolved into such a bloody conflict. Seems that the release of Roadhouse, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, seduced a legion of rabid enthusiasts who went to war against aficionados for the 1989 film. Consequently, one half of the country was crazy for Swayze, and the other... Oh boy, okay. Initial out of the theater reaction to Civil War was that I had just seen one of the best films of the year. It's well-paced, the production design and effects are outstanding. Never once saw the zippers on the monsters' backs. I admire Garland for creating the appearance of keeping his political views close to the vest, to pretending that he was focusing on the conflict itself. So it sounds like he came out of it thinking it was one of the best films of the year, and then probably heard the opinions of others, is what it sounds like. Because he literally said, like, I came out of the theater thinking it was one of the best movies of the year, and he gave it a 59%. So again, it sounds like a lot of people are letting the opinions of others influence what they think. See, Max Vision, 77%, says, awesome tension with too crackling sound design. Absolutely agree with that. You just have to go along for the ride and view this from the four journalist point of view. Here you have the first really bad review, 29% bogus from Comics and Cosmetics. Let's see. Pretentious nonsense. Always a good starter. Civil War is a dystopian war movie, penned and directed by Alex Garland. Okay. I'm trying to see if I can get past the plot things. I was very curious about this film going in. It stood to be a very relevant and poignant film, considering the current climate in the United States, and possibly an instant classic in a similar vein to Red Dawn. However, once the film was over, my notepad was nothing more than a series of questions rather than observations. The United States has broken apart into different factions, the largest of those factions is the Western Front. The Florida Alliance, that's what it was. Oh boy, let's see. Which is the only time the Florida Alliance is ever mentioned in the film, and in all honesty, felt like some kind of poorly executed Florida Man joke. The last of the factions that is also only vaguely mentioned is the insinuation of a Maoist northwestern region. No other information is offered or hinted at. Just that China seems to have an influence and possible foothold in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Yes. And that actually makes sense, right? Because if the war is happening within our country and we're fighting each other, the fact that there is going to be a section of the United States that's potentially been taken over by China, that seems to make logical sense to me. But already I'm looking at this saying, okay, wait a minute. You're making such a giant leap to say, well, the Florida Alliance, it must be some kind of Florida Man bad or whatever. What? Bro. Really? Garland clearly made attempts to keep the film politically neutral. However, this backfires tremendously, leaving the audience unable to connect with any character on screen. Soldiers of various factions seem to shoot to kill indiscriminately and unprovoked without care or concern as to what side the other is on as soon as a soldier or rebel. That's the whole point, dude! Literally, that is the fog of war. People are acting in such a way to where they are not acting in a sensible fashion. You want to know what's not sensible? Fighting on your own soil against fellow American citizens. So, again, sounds like someone bringing in their own biases into it. Let's see. John Parks gave it 100%. I'm going to call this out. I'm sorry. This film does not deserve 100%. Most films do not deserve 100%. This is reserved for, like, classics. Things like 12 Angry Men. It's a Wonderful Life. Even those films, though, maybe not be 100% films. John Parks says, what can I say that hasn't already been said? All I can say is that for me, this is Alex Garland's best film. No, Ex Machina is better. What he does best is blend beauty and horror. This time around, the focus is on the horror of war, but not necessarily from the perspective of the soldier. This film displays war's effect on the average citizen. I think that's a great point. It's not about it from the soldier's perspective. It's about it from an average person. Scott's thoughts. A strong cautionary tale that Americans need to watch. 75%. Very shocking. I agree. Master Rue. Oh, this is the one that drove me nuts. He's going to give it a 10% heinous score, and this is all that Master Rue's going to say. The Civil War, in my mind, on whether to walk out of this nonsense was far more entertaining. Well done. And then he left everything else unrated. I actually have a bigger issue with that than his review. Bro, if you're going to downvote something like that, you got to provide more context, bro. Crisco 12, 70%. Writer-director Alex Garland has never been one to shy away from controversial ideas and premises, from the exploration of self-destruction and annihilation to the interrogation of women's experiences of misogyny in men. Ugh. In many ways, Civil War is his most provocative film yet. Let's see. Divosaurus Rex, 88%. This was an intense, scarier than any horror movie I've seen in recent memory. It's an intriguing, warning, cautionary tale, and also makes you think about how numb we are to seeing images of war around the world because it's not happening in our backyard. I think that's a great point. Vex Electronica, 35% bogus. Civil War takes place in a near future where America has plunged into civil war, has fractured the country into 4 states or zones. Small group of journalists. Let's see if they get into... I went into this really neutral. The obvious baiting that can be pulled out of it, this well aside, I'm a fan of Alex Garland's, especially his reimagining of The Devil May Cry that was solid despite overwhelming fan displeasure. Unfortunately, I found myself pretty bored with this film, not for the absolute lack of world and character building, which a little would have been nice as Garland's capable of doing that well, but for its surface-level exploration of the price of war. The last 20-ish minutes really save it because it puts you right in the action, but it feels for naught when it's carried by characters you can't really care about. Okay, again, I think there's some valid criticism there, for sure. I don't think that score really, necessarily represents that, but I think that there, again, criticism of the characters, but I do think that there is a good explanation because it's about them being kind of like this vacuous medium by which you travel along the road trip to see how the horrors of war are presented. See, Young Queasy, I feel bad for all the people that left before the end credits scene that revealed Jessie to be Lou Bloom's daughter. I get those references. Mr. Know-It-All, 59% decent. If you're someone who has been in the fence about watching it, you want to watch my review. Oh, baited. The first 6 minutes is non-spoiler. Kimikati, 100% excellent. Come on, no 100%. Currently am speechless. Need to process this movie. Shorty Short. Shout out to Shorty Short. But I do want you to update your review with more information, Laura. But still, a decent score. Cringe Factor. I watched 3 horror films and this dystopian war film. This was the scariest. 90%, 72%, 75%, 100%. This was the first review. This is Savvy. This is a conservative personality. Give it 100%. Should probably wait a day or two to process what I just saw, but can't wait. This review looks different between now and tomorrow afternoon. I've had time to process my thoughts. Can't stop shaking. This was cinematic juggernaut worth a seat in an IMAX theater. I definitely think it's worth seeing in IMAX for sure. It's unsettling, haunting, depressing, and beautiful. This movie felt like an unstoppable force, an emotional roller coaster that creates tension by reminding us of our humanity. It's like watching the war edition of National Geographic in real time. We get the desensitized perspective of photojournalists with the heart-wrenching disposition of a casual reader. It's an awkward juxtaposition, but he pulled it off. This was disturbingly well done. I agree. Wouldn't give it the highest score, but I still agree. Anyway, that's right now the debate going on over Civil War. The Civil War over Civil War. Snowgolem 13 on Odyssey says, when what journos are looked at as heartless, wow, who would have thought? Yeah, no. It's not a surprise to us, but that's why I'm honestly surprised that it was put onto film. Because if anything, this just exposes the media. It just doesn't do so in a way that many conservatively minded persons would want. Right? We want it to be a movie that's like so on the nose conservative that it, tells it how it is. Instead, what we get is someone who probably, in their mind, talking about Alex Garland, probably is, based off of his previous movies and previous things, is more liberally minded, but also in this case, right, it seems to be instead showing how evil these people actually are. Again, we're talking about people who have become so depraved They walk amongst dead bodies or people dying to do nothing but get the shot. Orange Hat. Civil War just doesn't seem to be my cup of tea. I can't honestly watch it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's going to be up to you. I guess, what do you mean by not your cup of tea? Is it because of the fact that there are graphic images in there, that it's likely more of a like independent type movie? I don't think that it's one to where it is so bizarre. Like, I think about films like Denis Villeneuve's Enemy. That's a movie I would not recommend to most people. I don't even ever want to watch it again, though I appreciate his skill as a filmmaker, because that one is just plain weird. You have to watch an explain video just to understand what's going on. This is not one of those movies. Southeastern Kaiju, what's going on? Hail to you. Thanks for being a member. Kink and Rumsky. Wait, journalists were bad. Shouldn't they have been white guys? No, instead, what is it? It's actually incredible. That's the other thing too, right? They're the bad guys and they're incredibly diverse. That seems to go against the narrative, doesn't it? Because most movies that we're critical of that have people portrayed as the bad guys, it's like, it's all white. It's like, yeah, guess what? You have, 2 women in this group? A Hispanic male and a black male? And they're not presented to be good people. I mean, come on. What else could you want at this point? Let's see. Southeast Kaiju, I see what you said. I'm not going to highlight it, man, but come on, dude. You're better than that. Snorpoopus. There was one well-known journalist working for CNN in the 90s who was given a very nasty nickname by her fellow journalists because of her war reporting. Yeah. Carl Jacobs. At this point, Hollywood has to give me a positive reason to spend money and time. Civil War does neither. I can understand that if you're coming at it from the perspective of you don't want to give money to any films because you don't want to support Hollywood. I can respect that. I still think it's a film worth seeing. And not that you have a lot of time to watch it in IMAX because it's going to be knocked out pretty quickly. But, yeah. See, Hardwick at 756 says, some people are saying the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare looks like Reddit carnage. Basically, it means hyper-violent in a nihilistic, dehumanizing way that treats human life as a joke. Okay. Again, that's the kind of stuff that just I don't care all that much about. Like, as far as what I mean by that, people calling something Reddit carnage. So I'm going to see the film and I'm going to make up my mind for myself. And people online can say whatever it is that they want to say. Abomination, what's going on, brother? Hanging out over on Odyssey. Says, fictional America should have had 100 states fighting all battle royale style, would have drawn in a bigger crowd. Yeah. What I love is that Tony, and I talked about this in my box office breakdown for the weekend, Tony, the first thing he has to say is political. Right, the first thing that Tony had to do was try to bring in Republican states and red states, and the breakdown politically. 22% of the audience was liberal. And then I think to myself, wait a minute. 22% of the audience was liberal. That means there's a lot of people in the audience that are not. Oh, man. But that's their focus, right? I think the journalists seeing this probably do think of the... That's the other thing, too, right? If any journalist who reviewed the film talks about the journalist in the movie as being heroes or heroic in any way, it exposes them. It's like, okay, so you're like the ones in the film. Okay, gotcha. No, not to trust you ever. It's the Abomination. Odin, what kind of American are you? Sounds like the meme of Texans meeting people moving in out of state. Ask where they're from. They say California, and the Texan goes brink of civil war. No, again, when I hear that line of what kind of American are you, it actually makes me more so think about who'd you vote for? That's what it sounds like. Oh, who'd you vote for? What kind of a person are you? What kind of American are you? That's what it sounds like to me. And so I think that again, there's a lot more to be said there because it's where we are right now. See, Laura says, the president in Civil War definitely never played hide and seek. Yeah, so I think there's some legitimate criticism people bring up about that. People are like, wait a minute. The president of the United States is just staying in the White House, right? But again, this is where nothing is spoon-fed to you. So all I could think about the whole time was, well, yeah, of course he's still in the White House. Did you not see this guy's speeches? Did you not see this guy in the beginning of the movie? So it starts off with Nick Offerman preparing for his speech. Very much, again, focused on his image, focused on these things. This is a guy who has what's the expression? Normalcy bias, I guess you could say. Like, this is someone who thinks, like, they're never going to break through the walls. They're never going to get into the White House. I'm the president of the United States. That's just something that's not going to happen. So you can just see that already, like, in the ego of this guy, that to the very end, his ego gets him captured and killed. So I look at that as being, okay, yeah, that just shows you how clueless, how pompous, how self-centered this guy is. But that's the other thing too, right? This guy is being presented this way and is dying, and yet you don't think of the soldiers who are doing this as being heroic at all. They're being portrayed as being bloodthirsty, as being almost demonic. They're just like, no, we got to kill him. And I heard some people say, like, oh, they got a kill order, so they got to follow through the order. It's like, no. These are people who are like, I want blood. I want to be the one who said I got to kill him. I want to be the one to kill this person. It's like, wow. Again, just the ugliness of war. Abomination says, if states banding together to obliterate the other states, destroying so much that it takes days just to make a 20-hour trip, I think it's a bit past the brink. Yeah, absolutely. That's why, again, the marketing, the descriptions outside of it, and I guess it's them trying to, obscure what the movie is. And again, that's why I hate the marketing. See, Laura says, I'm in the closet Republican. My in-laws and daughter don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's something where it's very real, right? We sometimes will keep these things from other people. I have family where we do not talk about certain political topics, because if we do, it gets very passionate very, very quickly, and it leads to a lot of tensions. And so that divide is very real. Absolutely. Abomination. Odin, how much did they pay you? Not a dime. Not a dime. I went to go see the film because if you're going to blame anyone for me defending the film, you got to blame Gary. All right? Because Gary made me see it. Gary made this homework for me to go watch. And I did. And you know what? I'm actually happy he did. For once, a movie that we went to where most of us thought it was going to be bad, and many of them, again, almost all of them but me, thought it was bad when it really isn't. It ends up something I actually enjoy for once. Let's see, Cthulhu. Something I don't think people realize is that Civil War and Cloverfield are suffering the same issue where audience expected a specific movie genre and can't reconcile with what the movie was. Cthulhu, that's actually a really interesting point. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are critical of, is it Cloverfield or like 10 Cloverfield Lane? Maybe it could be 10 Cloverfield Lane. And please clarify if that's the case or not. But I mean, think about almost any movie where you go in expecting something specific and then you don't get it, right? You can be disappointed, right? Again, subjectively, that experience makes complete sense to me, right? And that's why anyone who is subjectively not enjoying the film, I'm not saying that you have to enjoy this film. What I am saying is that the film is objectively well done and well made. And that a lot of the criticisms that are being leveled against it are not really based in the reality of the movie itself. But yeah, just thinking about almost any movie that you've ever gone to where your expectations are subverted, right? There's certain subversive expectations that happen, for instance, Last Jedi, where it's not just that, it's actually just the movie itself just cannot stand on its own. It's just not very well made. But then there's others where it's not what you expect, but then you actually have to think about the movie and you think, oh, actually, it's not that bad. I mean, this might be a bad example because it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but I think another example would be Iron Man 3. A lot of people hate that movie because they hated what happened with one of the characters, I'm, of course, blanking out on a lot of these things, right? The character names. But they freaked out because they didn't like the change that happened to the character. You find out later on that it's not actually the character. It's instead this actor named Trevor. But people didn't like that. People didn't like the whole bait and switch with that, okay? But the people that I heard complain the most about it were actually hardcore fans of the comics. Since I didn't have that background, when that happened to me, I was like, that's really funny. That's actually hilarious. Because I was looking at the movie not as an Iron Man movie, right? Not as a comics movie, but as a Shane Black movie. I went in knowing the kind of movie that I was expecting to get, and I got it. And I was like, this was actually a very fun Shane Black movie. So that, I think, is also part of it. So, yeah, I think, Cthulhu, I think you bring up an interesting point. Ryan Liu still hasn't said hi. You left a random comment before the stream started, and now you're posting the same comment, and at no point did you say hi to me. Disappointed. Bro, I've talked about this on videos constantly. So you know what? Watch my box office breakdown from this weekend. You'll hear the same end final run that I've been thinking now for months. Master of Gaming, Jefferson White and Kaylee Spaney will be in Hellboy, The Crooked Man, and Alien Romulus, respectively. I don't really have much hope for Hellboy, but Alien Romulus, I've actually heard, has some potential. Wendy Hunter, thank you for going over the movie and giving it a good description. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I apologize if I did spoil it for anybody. Southeastern Kaiju, Civil War, another tired reboot of an American classic. Print screen. Did any of the trailers before Civil War get a good reaction out of the audience? Unfortunately, I was not able to tell because the showings always for my theaters are at like 7 p.m. And the issue that comes out of that is my kids go down at 7. And so it's very tough to try to make it to those showtimes. So luckily there's like 20 minutes of credits. It's the only reason why I even made it in time. I was able to get to the theater, sit down, and I think maybe see one trailer before the film started. Jonah Wingster, guys, are we going to war? I hope not. Master of Gaming, I like Civil War as much as Squid Game and Cop Shop. Okay. Abomination. California being taken over by China makes more sense, especially after what they did when Winnie the Pooh made a visit. Oh, man. Yeah, and then it also ties back to the moment where people look at it as being just a representative of Southern racists. And it's like, no, Jesse Plemons is not really... Again, if you actually watch the movie itself and look at the character that he is, he kills the guy that's from Hong Kong. Okay, if there's now a Chinese presence in the country. Let's see. Laura says, I think your more accurate title for this movie would be Getting the Shot. Ooh, I think that's Getting the Shot. Yeah, I think that Civil War is definitely a title they chose for a very specific reason. They knew it would get people talking. And again, I understand why there is a, back and forth about this. Yeah, Savvy's great. I know that Laura has recommended Savvy. See, Hardwick, the best part of Civil War is when Captain America fist fights Abraham Lincoln. See, Laura says, I still don't know which side Jesse's character was on. Yeah. No one, I mean, again, I don't either, because he seemed to be in military garb, and the only persons that I ever saw wearing military garb were the Western Front forces. But again, it's very hard to, and that's, again, something that I enjoy, is that it does not make either side out to really look all that good. One of the scenes, for instance, that again, I like to say it, and I think it's a legitimate thing to say. The people that are criticizing this movie, guess what? Congratulations, you're now on the same side as Grace Randolph. Because you know who else didn't like this movie? Grace Randolph. I don't want to be on the same side as Grace Randolph. So I enjoy this movie. Now, obviously, I enjoy it by itself, but I am happy to know that I'm also not on the same side as Grace Randolph. Obviously, I'm sure that there's some movie that we've been agreement on in the past, because that's just how movies work. But one of the issues that she had with the movie was you have the Western forces breaking into the White House, and then they have one of the security of the president, who must also be like a publicist or something, is out saying like, hold your fire. I'm just here to talk. The The president would like to negotiate surrender, like terms of surrender, etc. She's got her hands up. She is loaded. Like, she does actually have a weapon on her side. So, still, hands up. Hands up, don't shoot. But guess what? She gets shot. And I think that the reason why she hated it so much was because in her mind, she thought, oh, the Western forces are supposed to be the good guys. And then there was that moment maybe for her, she realized, oh, wait a minute, they're not the good guys. They just killed someone who was not an enemy and blah, 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 blah. Oh, man. Because, again, I think in her mind, she was probably painting the picture of, oh, this is just a Trump allegory. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't like this either. Wendy Hunter says, based on what you said about the noise in the IMAX, I worry about those that have PTSD as their warning. There's not one for the movie that I'm aware of because I don't remember seeing one, but I will give one for sure. Yeah, I think some of the sounds could definitely trigger PTSD, especially for anyone who's been involved with like war. Because there's during the fighting sequences, the gunfire can get very, very loud. Helicopter sequences get very, very loud too. So yeah, I definitely think that if those things can trigger, or you think that they could potentially trigger PTSD, yeah. See, Orange Hat says, movies too close to reality are not something that I can watch because it was made not for entertainment. May not be woke by our standards, but it still gives me a gut feeling that agenda is involved. Okay, well, I would simply argue that I think it is entertaining. I would say, dude, go to Critic Lists and read through some of those reviews. And again, this is obviously going to sound very biased, but I would say, based on what I've seen, the only review that was critical that seemed like it might actually be worth going all the way through was the one by Vex Electronica. Because it sounds like, so going on Vex Electronica's comment again, let's see. Garland's film better serves as a purely artsy, albeit kind of hollow take on the impact of war. I think, again, that can be seen. I think that, again, it comes across as being a very valid criticism. Though for me, again, I don't think it's purely artsy. It's definitely more on the artistic side, but it's not purely artsy. It's a film that, again, a $25 million opening weekend domestically, that means you got more than just the typical art housey personnel going to see the film. Okay. But I would say read through those, okay? Because I found it entertaining. Not in the way where it's like, oh man, it's so much fun, but entertaining in the, oh, okay. Orange Eye says, if I'm wrong, then I may sample it later on. Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're not bothered by violence or any of the things that I said that could potentially cause, triggers, I think it's worth just checking out just to make up your own mind with. Keely Chow, the only movies I will never watch again for the second time are The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. I'd rather watch a Dallas Cowboys playoff game than those two movies. Go Cowboys. Prince Green, what kind of American are you? Could be a contender for best one-liner at this year's Raven. I agree, Prince Green. That's a great point. It reminds me I still need to make that nominations ballot. Abomination. Weird that software cut off the end of my sentence. The meme ends with the Texan going, because they said they're from California, and it's a funny meme. Ah, gotcha. CK Rumsky says, I think what bothers me is the movie is about an American Civil War. Why is it never a civil war in the UK or Canada or Russia, etc.? It's like everyone is rooting for America to end. I think if you just have to think about it from an American lens, well, we had a civil war for one. And I guess, and this could be my ignorance of non-American history, because obviously there have been battles and wars before, but has there ever been a similar war in another country to the extent of the American Civil War, as recent as our Civil War? If you catch my drift, right? Because obviously, there's been wars, like there's been world wars. There's obviously been fights within countries too. But I guess, and I think this is more so American bias than anything else. It's just, okay, it makes more sense for there to be a movie about a second American Civil War rather than a civil war somewhere else, if that makes sense. Also, I think that if let's be honest, of all the places where civil war happens as far as the developed world is concerned, or the possibilities, I think that we would have to agree the higher chance of a civil war happening in a developed world would be in ours because of how divisive things are in our country. Hardwick, based on what I've heard in reviews, the president in Civil War doesn't sound all that bad. I would disagree. I think anyone who's saying not is having wishful thinking. Snorpoopas, I have one friend who has agreed to a pact with me not to discuss politics. He still slips and makes little comments, and I just give him the tight, fake smile of death. I know that one. Nation Civil War is Odin's movie. Barbie is Az and Chrissy's movie. What other movies are going to be disliked by everyone but one person? But that's just not true. As I said, Jeremy Johns thought the movie was good. He gave it his third highest rating. He says, good time, no alcohol required. Not his highest glowing review, but still. And even the biggest criticism that I've heard so far that comes across at the very least as being genuine is from Critical Drinker. And even he had a lot of positive things to say about the movie itself. I would say that's another thing, Orange Chat and others to look at. Look at his review. I think he does a good job. Much better job than I ever could hope to. Lou says, the movie is Cloverfield. The audience is expected to get a monster movie. Yes. Okay. But they got kids trying to survive a monster attack. Okay, yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, Cloverfield's a very, very good movie, right? Groomer Drunk 3PO says, people who hate Civil War, incels. Dang. Zane Waters, the Mandarin. Yeah, that's what it was, the Mandarin. Wendy Hunter, Iron Man 3, I didn't like at first, but on second watch, I enjoyed it more. Again, once you know what it is, yeah. People were pissed off about the Mandarin. And for me, I was like, I have no idea who this is because I never read the comics. I think this is hilarious. Zion Water says, the one difference is that Iron Man 3 was an adaptation, so the expectations about the Mandarin were valid. Yes, true. However, they're not when you remember he ends up not being the actual Mandarin, and they did make a one-shot where they actually confirm the Mandarin is real and still around and is actually mad that his name was being used. Steven, are you going to watch Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in theaters? It made 600,000 yesterday. Probably not, just because I don't have time to watch most things. Prince Green, Grace Randolph also didn't like the Ministry of Gentlemanly Warfare. Okay, great. That's already off to a great start for me. Hardwick says, having been both Paul Atreides and Willy Wonka, Timothy Chalamet is uniquely qualified to invent the everlasting Gom Jabbar. Now, see, Hardwick, I want more comments like that, dude. That's funny. The everlasting Gom Jabbar. Steven, your thoughts on Keanu Reeves voicing Shadow for Sonic 3? I don't really care about the Sonic movies. The first one I enjoyed for the fact that the director listened to the fans. I haven't rewatched it, don't want to rewatch it, and Sonic 2 was not good. I'm glad people have been enjoying it, but I have no interest in seeing the next one. Steven says, wish you were in the Vegas trip. It was cool meeting the Geeks and Gamers gangs. We come to the next Vegas trip. Probably not Vegas. Vegas is just something where it's probably not going to happen anytime soon until my kids are a little bit older. Again, it's tough to get out there. I am someone where I prefer to drive than to fly. And so that's already going to make it a lot harder in that way. But also, I can only be away from my family for any length of time. The big, and actually even more so than that, I'm never going to be able to make that specific Vegas trip as long as I'm working. I'm sorry, I can't justify taking a week off from a real job. And again, by real, I'm not trying to say that they don't have a real job. No, like when this is something that is extra for me, that this is something that is I'm doing it for fun. I can't justify being like, oh, I got to take a week off to go hang out. So if they decide to move the Vegas trip to the summertime, it becomes a possibility. But since that's not going to happen because this is very clearly something where there's a specific time of year where it is now going to be, and once you have something set, hey, I totally understand, totally get it. But that doesn't work for me. The next thing that I have, there's no guarantees because I don't even think that we've even verified it ourselves, but you know, we've been going to Dallas Dallas Fan Expo, I think is what it is, that the event that it's surrounding. We've been going to Dallas the last few years, though, so that would be the next thing I'm aware of that I'd be able to go to as far as meetups. And that's probably the only one that I would be able to do over the summer long term. There is going to be a Comic-Con in Nashville and in Knoxville. And I know that Force of Light is going to the one in Knoxville, and that's over the summer. I will probably be able to do that one because that is much easier to be able to tell the family, hey, I'm going to be out for X amount of time, but I can be home by dinner time, right? Or I can be home that evening. But yeah. Abomination says, oh, the software doesn't show words inside double asterisks. Guess that's two things the software doesn't show. It's such a weird thing. Carl Jacobs, yes, the Russian Civil War was much worse. But I guess because in my mind, when I think about the Russian Civil War, all I can think about, but wasn't that just a ploy by Marxist communists trying to create disruption to take over the entire country? Am I totally off base with that one? Strawberry's Keeper says, Russia's Civil War 1917-1923 was protracted and seriously violent. It could give the American Civil War a run for its money. But again, wasn't that just communist? And again, completely could be complete ignorance on my part. Alistair Campbell, have you seen the drive video? No, I haven't seen it because I lived it last Friday. And yeah, they're on the same page. Good place to be. Zion Waters. One of the reasons a civil war is likely to happen here than anywhere else is weakened thanks to the First Amendment. Yep. And also Second Amendment too, you could say. Wayne Harris says, I've also heard a lot of good reviews of Civil War, but for me sounds too triggering. Yeah, I mean, if it's triggering for violence, yes. Again, politics, there really isn't anything there for that. Master Gaming, I can see the first Omen making the same amount worldwide as the Menu. I have no interest in the first Menu, dude. Carl Jacobs, does this warrant Odin as a nomination for Shill of the Year? Oh, man. Hardwick. Well, I personally don't mind the Mandarin twist much. I can understand why some do. Oh, me too. Like, anyone who hated it for that reason, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely get that. Snowbaby Cuber. Grace Randolph is irrelevant yawn fest. She's going to be reduced to doing a show about tailoring. It will be called So. Agreed. Victor Fontaine, what is going on, Victor Fontaine? Cthulhu to say, LOL, you won't mind that liberal sub standing in for you for a week. What can possibly go wrong? Lenin was... Oh, man. Storabubas, communists versus white Russians wanting a czar versus white Russians wanting a republic with a few Western troops thrown in for good measure. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, but that's the whole, Marxism is rooted in division. And so the whole point of it is to disrupt everything. So, again, could be totally off base with this. Is it not that the communists disrupted it to cause a civil war to then lead to the type of strife that would lead to eventually the communist takeover? So a little bit different than civil war here, where it was people fighting each other that was not being influenced really by anyone else. I guess, again, if that makes any sense. Wendy Hunter says, triggered for violence and the sound would trigger my muscle spasms. I look like I'm having... Oh, okay. Gotcha, Wendy Hunter. Yeah. Then I would say... hold off on it. It might be worth checking out when it's on physical media, because then that way you have control over volume and things like that. Yeah, that I always completely legitimate, of course. Laura says, love Cloverfield, especially when the chick blew. Man, I do like Cloverfield too. That film I enjoyed so much more. And speaking of that one, I also really enjoyed 10 Cloverfield Lane with John Goodman, because it's set in the Cloverfield universe, but it's a completely different story. And I know that the way that it's tied into Cloverfield and the universe is a bit contrived. It's still, I think, very entertaining. And it's one that I think is also just a very good movie. Man, darn good film. Unfortunately, the Cloverfield Paradox, which was supposed to be the third film in this unofficial trilogy of Cloverfield-inspired universes, was just not good. And that was a massive disappointment. Massive, massive. Let's see. Hardwick says, Alan Richardson has been saying dumb things for years. He makes Sunday sermon videos and push socialism in them. He even literally said Jesus was a socialist, which is, again, the dumbest things you ever hear. Laura says, speaking of Dune, I'm going to see a Hans Zimmer concert in October. Oh, awesome. Jonah Wingster, you have a good night, man. Yeah, we're going to be wrapping up things here in a second. I guess the one thing I will end off on is a little bit talk about the box office. Let me see. What can I talk about? I guess I can promote Geeks and Gamers. I write for geeksandgamers.com. This article back from January, I've been writing. Crazy that I've been writing now on the website for 4 months. Goodness gracious me. But this is the article here, if you want to find it, where I talk about my random crazy charting. So this is the one where I take into account what take you tend to see, right? What you tend to see in the take that are domestic, the take domestically, what you tend to see internationally, 40%, and then the China cut, 25%, okay? And that's why this is a very good website. This is a very good article, rather, to reference if you ever see me talking about it and talking about break-even points for films like, recently it's been Godzilla and Dune Part 2. Because looking at those metrics, then I can say, right now, based on the numbers we have, and again, these are not the most up-to-date numbers, Dune Part 2 has made money, whereas as of the recording of this stream, Godzilla X Kong has not made money. Now, Godzilla X Kong is on its way to making money. It's amazing how many people have unsubscribed from the channel because I'm not telling them what they want to hear in regards to this MonsterVerse stuff. But as I said, it's on the way. It's going to happen. It's just not going to be as big as I think some people had expected it to. This was the other thing as well as I had mentioned earlier with Civil War. Civil War not only won the weekend, right? Opening weekend, $25 million is $10 million over the $15 million made by Godzilla X Kong in its third week of release. Very, again, surprised by that. But also look at this. Civil War dropped 68% from Sunday to Monday. Godzilla X Kong dropped another 79% and is now under $1 million a day. And whereas Civil War, I do think is going to see probably a pretty drastic fall week 2. It would not surprise me whatsoever. And it also not looking good as far as prospects to break even. A $50 million budget means the film needs to make quite a bit of money to break even. It's not looking like that's going to happen for it. But hey, you never know. Godzilla X Kong, however, just not really impressing all that much for me. Doing a bit of a comparison here, just to give you a bit of understanding, okay? When you adjust the numbers for inflation, oh man, okay, I know people get triggered by that. But if you adjust the numbers for inflation, you'll see here all of the other Godzilla films in the MonsterVerse universe. MonsterVerse. I know why I said it that way. They did not get to under $1 million a day until the third Thursday, but that was for Godzilla King of the Monsters. After that, it wasn't until the fourth Monday, the fourth week of release. If you do a comparison, same point of release, third Monday, $159 for Godzilla X Kong domestically. So that is definitely doing better than the last couple of films, right? So looking better than Godzilla vs. Kong, Godzilla King of the Monsters. But compared to where Kong Skull Island was, 162, okay? Not too far off there. But again, look at the number differences between the days, right? But nothing compared to the $231 million made by Godzilla 2014. So I've been saying this for a while. I think that the end result is going to be Godzilla X Kong is going to be probably the third highest grossing when you adjust for inflation, probably coming in behind Kong Skull Island and behind the original Godzilla. Original Godzilla getting $698 million when you adjust, $674 million for Kong Skull Island. I think that this movie, it's already, so worldwide numbers, it's going to pass King of the Monsters very easily. Also, I think it's going to be probably somewhere between $500 and $600 million by the end of its run, if I had to guess. I don't think it's going to get anything more, though, than Kong Skull Island. All right? So, again, for its budget, very impressive, very good numbers, but definitely not as big as I think some people think it is. Design Waters, sorry, yes, Second Amendment. I'm on a walk and just moved. No problem, no problem. I think that both you could actually make a point with as far as why it would be much more likely to be seen here than other places. And let's see, Kimberly G. Okay, here we go. Orange Chat Gotta Go Barroom Podcast. Hey, go check out the Barroom Podcast, everybody. And yeah, let's go ahead and wrap things up tonight. So hey, thank you all very much for being here. This was a fun discussion. So obviously, I strongly disagree with the people who are being critical of the film Civil War. I think it's a solid movie. I think that, objectively speaking, it's a solid film. I think that there are just too many things. And as I mentioned before, if you want a really good breakdown about why the film is objectively good, I would say check out Critical Drinker's review, because even he, who did not like the film, has criticisms of it. Even he has to admit that there are some very good things, that there are a lot of good objective things that exist within the movie itself. So glad to be adding to that discussion. I think it's important. I think that some people are being way too harsh on the film because of their own innate political biases rather than what the actual film has in it. So I would say go check it out for yourself. Right. Other than those caveats we mentioned before about, the sound and some of the images, I would say it's definitely worth seeing. And if you can see it in IMAX, I think that's even more worth seeing. And I would also say, if you've seen any Alex Garland films before, that could also be a good metric. If you've seen Ex Machina and you did not like it, I don't think you'll like this film necessarily. Right. Because that film, I think, has a very similar tone where it has this bit of like this independent feel to it, where it's a bit weird, it's a bit wonky, but it's also mainstream enough to where general audiences can enjoy it. I think this film very much in a very similar line, right? A very, very similar line. Let's see. Cthulhu says, thank you and have a wonderful evening. You too. Can't wait for the second weekend of Civil War to see how it plays out. Me too. Again, I suspect it'll be a pretty big drop, and I don't think it has a chance to break even based on what we've seen so far. Still liked it. Keely Chow, it's awesome that you're doing some Steiner math. Always. Wendy Hunter, thank you. King and Rumsky, did we ever figure out how Kong survived falling off the Empire State Building? Unrealistic. We must hate it. Alistair Campbell. And men don't watch that. Yeah, no thank you. No, thank you. Anyway, that's going to be it for me, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you all very much for watching. Please make sure, before you go, smash that like button, loud that fire button, awesome, smash that rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And as always, God bless. And now for a special shout out to all of my April Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with those members over on Patreon: Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel as Eagle Rider, and Miss Mountain Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name as well. To my Subscribe Star members, we have Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, and ZK-Man, check out his channel xtheboundaries.ceo. That's where you can find his website and his other social media platforms. And also a huge shout out to my one YouTube Chosen of Valhalla member, Mr. Roy. Always awesome. Every single member of my Chosen is amazing. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream video or listed, access to a podcast, access also to a giveaways channel that I host over on my Discord server, or any of these other things that are offered, check out the top link in the video description below and become a member today. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Easter. And as always, God bless.